And record over yonder here. There we go. Okay. Oh, is it gonna do that whole thing again? We just did a dress rehearsal, guys. Come on. Technical issues are a fantastic way to begin a worthwhile endeavor. It totally did freeze up on me again. We will. Something like that. I'll have to do this again here. After all of that, right? That's okay. We got everything pre-screened here. This is quite the studio scenario we got going on, though.
That's what's up.
Alright.
That's what's up.
I can't even pull that off. Here's my attempt. What is up, homie?
Not quite.
What is up with you, homie? Oh man. Good times. Okay, let's try this here again. Oh my goodness. Okay, and we are recording and it's going fantastic. And we got music? There is music. Fantastic. Welcome, friends, to episode 11 of Friendology. Today is August 23rd, 2021. My name is Biniam. This is my friend Joshua, Roger, and Frank. Today we are discussing the question, what does self-care look like? In regards to our own experiences. This is a podcast where we celebrate friendship. This is a podcast where we intentionally want to pursue what it could look like, especially amongst men. And so we hope you enjoy this banter amongst friends as we talk about self-care. Hope you enjoy this episode. Episode 11. Episode 11 means how many months now have we been going?
Wow.
I mean, we've missed some weeks along the way too, haven't we? We've missed some weeks along the way.
It's approaching half a year.
I think so.
You start like April, May, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember.
That sounds about right. Marchish, we started talking about it.
It was all on Zoom at first.
I remember that. Yeah, we were still in the midst of pandemic. Yeah. But here we are.
Wow. Time flies.
Wow.
One of those things I remember distinctly at the beginning when I was first sharing the idea with you guys was I can't wait to see our 1 year mark come and go, and then sort of do a comparison of where we've come, over a year. I have a feeling Frank will be like the aficionado of live streams by that point. You're like, I got this.
I keep faking my way through it, so
you do.
I think I'll still be doing that 1 year mark.
I love the differences, though, in which we're coming to. So I'm probably the one that's had a lot more FaceTime with the camera screen, right? Roger's runner up here, and he's already embarking on his enterprises. But I think over the long haul, though, like it's neat to see how we're changing or shifting over time, especially in the context of friendship. And that'll be something we'd love to get your guys' input who are listening in. But it'll be great to hear your assessment of how we've grown, how we've kind of adapted in our style, in our engagement, and so on. It's been a couple of weeks. We've already been doing a bunch of checking in. Let's just do a quick sort of spot check-in on how things have been going in our context of life. For me, I'll start. I have been busy in a few endeavors. I've had some difficult conversations with some very close people in my life. And so whenever I have the opportunity, and I call those opportunities because they are going to come, but they help define the pathway, the trajectory, the way that we're going to proceed forward, and the way we connect with people. And so whenever I find these difficult opportunities coming up, I'm also watching what it does internally for me. How am I changing and growing as an individual? And one of those things I'm doing amazing at, dear friends, is I'm learning to reach out to my friends a lot more. My way of seeing life is a lot more independent, and so I like being the Lone Ranger, kind of doing things on my own. But I've been really working hard at extending myself and saying, so it's a bit of a sore point right now for me in life right now, and here's how I want to share my struggles with my dear friends, and then connection or friendships that we do share. It's been a learning experience for me. It's not an easy one. I'm still feeling my way through it, but I do appreciate you guys being there. On top of that, I am also navigating a move. So I'm moving to a bigger apartment, still in the same area in the downtown Calgary. But that's the facilitated living with my sister. So we are super excited about that. We're on the tail end of the move, and so that has added more time there. And then, of course, my mom's birthday was last week. And for those of you who do not know, my mom is one of my biggest heroes in life, the biggest impact influencer in my life in an amazing way. She passed away a year ago, and so in the midst of remembering her as like me, my brothers and dad and my sisters, as we did so, I also had the fantastic opportunity to reconnect with my brother, one of my brothers who had kind of cut me off for some time there just because of differences of perspectives. So it was a really sweet experience to be able to reconnect with my one brother, and so that made me feel really good too. And as I'm about to hand the torch off to Frank, I just want to highlight, because you guys may not see it on the screen, Frank, would you share with our viewers your fantastic socks?
Oh.
These are amazing. So these are like, I thought they were ballerina socks, but they feature pink, so he's like totally rocking the pink.
Birds of, I don't know.
Tropical birds, maybe?
Yeah, like
Toucans?
macaws or something. I don't
Love
know.
it. Love it. I just wanted to feature.
Courtesy of Steve Bezos.
Oh,
no,
Jeffrey
Bezos. Sorry, not
his
Steve.
brother, right?
Yeah, Jeffrey Bezos.
And I'm impressed that they are also matching, because apparently it's a thing not to match socks anymore. So
Is that the cool trend nowadays?
I've
That's what all
seen
the
that.
kids are
I've
doing.
seen that more so amongst females, right? But
My son's been doing it. That's because he doesn't care what he wears.
that's awesome.
My check-in is it's been a positive and challenging at the same time. I've been helping a close friend through some difficult times, so that's been a bit of a challenge. But at the same time, I'm happy to help her work through it. And then personally, for me, it's been extremely busy work-wise. As after a bit of a slow stretch.
And for those of you who do not know, Frank is a sanitation engineer. Tell me what you do,
Maybe
Frank.
one level below that. Well, I do molecular biology for at the university, so I'm involved in a lot of biomedical research projects. But yeah, so it works. Work is kind of you never really know how it's going to go. Sometimes it's crazy, sometimes it's quiet. It kind of depends on when things come in. And then more personally, it's been really nice to try and reconnect with some of the friendship activities that I used to do pre-pandemic, and kind of get back to life as normal. So that's been a bit of a highlight of my last couple of weeks. So that's been really great.
I've loved seeing you in person.
I know.
For all of my friends, these are some of my dear friends here. Each and every one of these men here, I have to stand on my tippy toes when I give them hugs. Like, that's how much I look up to them, literally and figuratively as well.
Yet you can literally lift each one of us up.
Have I ever tried that?
You're deceptively strong. We should have an arm wrestling contest.
He'll probably win.
Process
we have
of
a
round robin
disagreement.
or elimination.
That's where I experience humility, in that setting. Yeah. No, Josh would totally cream us all. We'd all be on the one side, and Josh would be like, "Yeah." Who do you want to hand it off?
I'm going to hand it over to Roger.
Hey, no problem. My check-in is primarily about my daughter, and it ties in to self-care. My daughter got her first job last week, working at Wendy's.
Celebrate.
And she's in Orlando, and she's on the freshman fringe of starting things. She hasn't actually started, but why she's relevant for my check-in is because I have been doing the work to set boundaries with her, and the boundaries that I'm setting and really working at keeping tie into my self-care piece as a dad with a kid who is a bit tough to deal with. So I ain't putting no money in the bank account because she's getting a paycheck next week. And that's my self-care right there. Giving the boundaries.
Boundaries as self-care. I love how last podcast spills into this one. So good. So good.
And with that, I'll hand it off.
Nice work, Roger. Nice work.
My self care in the last day, well, a couple days anyways, has been doing some spring cleaning and going through some of my stuff, and that feels nice. Feels nice to get things tidied and neat, and get rid of some junk and fill up the garbage bin, the recycle bin. Had some vacation, saw some family a week and a half ago ish. That was nice, and things are just good.
You did go on a road trip, didn't
That's
you?
right.
A little road trip, yeah.
To see family in Saskatchewan.
That's right. Yeah,
Right.
it was good. Yeah, and my kids are back to school. They just finished their second day. They had Friday and they just had a Monday. And so navigating, waking up at some ungodly hour in the morning to send them off.
They start early than the
They
other
do.
schools.
Well, they have to catch the bus, so I send them off at like 7:30 on the bus.
But all the
So
other
it's
schools start in September, though, right?
No, they're starting now.
Oh wow!
Yeah, they're already started.
My God.
Yeah, I think it was the 20th or I forget the day.
That's early this year, isn't it?
19th. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Mine don't start until September, actually.
Mm.
In Cochrane, but
And then am I looking forward to? I'm trying to ponder this.
Okay.
There's in my life there is in the span of I think 8 days or so. There's some I don't know like 4 birthdays or something in the early September. Not to mention Labor Day and starting of some practicum students that I'm supervising. Just so many things all at once.
Okay.
Within a span of a week. So
Okay.
I will need to practice some self-care and balance. But I've still got a week here to breathe.
Okay.
Or to go crazy planning, maybe. It's more like it. Buy gifts and all that stuff, right?
Frank, when is your slow season?
Slow season.
Yeah, like do you
I don't
get
really have.
I was gonna say like whenever you talk about
It's sort of like when I take time off work, like I pay for it because I get back and everything's just piled up and the emails keep coming in and it's just like why did I take time off?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
I know that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, you both
There's
have
no
kinda
one
fine.
filling in.
It's almost like you both have a really specific niche that you're occupying.
Yes.
And others can really fulfill very like as competently perhaps. That's the tough
I
spot.
think it would be tough to. I think they could replace me, but I think that person would have a learning curve.
Right.
So.
I see. Interesting. There's some other questions I have, but I'm going to hold them at bay. Thanks for the check-in, boys.
Mm-hmm.
That was really helpful. All right, let's jump into today's topic of self-care. I selected this topic because I've been going through a season where I'm trying to keep things in check, and yet it's still a challenge to be able to navigate both like work schedule for one, family schedule for another, relationship schedules as well, and other engagements along the way. You know, the in-betweens in life, and sometimes it can get a little bit like oi. And Roger and I were sitting together in where we join a couple of other friends as well every couple of weeks, talking about business developments because we got our unique interests that we're pursuing that way and want to support each other. But the question is asked in the sense of what defines this, like what are we trying to accomplish? And I think the destination we got to in our assessment was it's a holistic way of seeing our life in the context of business. So we're not wanting to be slaves to business per se and growing in that way, but we want to have that in its place in the right spot while we're accommodating the rest of life, right? And so I sat there for how much time did you guys give me? Like a good half hour, 45 minutes, where they sort of just they didn't grill me. They gave me an opportunity to sit with some of the difficult things that I experienced in my relationships in this past little season here, and I was sitting there reflecting and really benefiting from their application of love and attention and encouragement to feel the feels, if you will, which is what I'm a big fan of. I was thinking, I really don't take time out for myself this way to do this kind of processing, right? So there's a certain level in which I think, oh, I'm confident enough to like move on from this zone here. I can process along the way, right? But just taking this time that I was encouraged to take by those who knew me well got me on this train of thinking, what does self-care look like? And I think I'm in that zone where I'm doing a daily podcast that I focus on self-reflective questions. I've got three themes, centering around awareness, learning to be aware of myself, learning kindness towards myself as I grow more aware of myself, and then also finally maximize my happiness. So this is how I'm trying to do self-care, and yet I'm still learning from others as I hear their patterns, their implementations of what they find helpful and beneficial. And so we hope this conversation serves you guys, but just talking a little bit about what that looks like and what kind of insights we can learn from each other or questions we want to pose to each other, that kind of thing. So who wants to dive into this theme of self care?
I'll jump in because I wanted to mention
Yes.
particularly the segue into that what you've just shared.
Yeah.
I think I had said it that before we go into the business precepts or concepts of our focus group,
Yeah.
that we bring our whole selves
I like that. Yeah.
to our business initiatives. And so perhaps if we're talking about the business, let's take a lens or a slice of our whole selves. And I guess that would apply even in our other relationships,
Sure.
Romantic, social, whatever. We bring our whole selves because we bring work stuff into that. So that it's symbiotic. Is that the word?
Yeah.
It's a symbiotic thing going on.
Sure.
With regards to self care, is what's coming into my head right now. I didn't plan to say any of this. It's just popping in.
Helpful, yeah.
It seems to be a symbiotic thing going on with self care, right?
I like the way you open it up, though. Like, what was that question you said?
I don't remember.
You came saying, "Hey, we want, bring your whole self.
Yeah.
Where are you at? What's going on? That kind of thing."
Yeah.
I thought that was really helpful. It was amazing. Roger did what I usually do, but I love the way you led in that. And you're like, "Hey, so let's," and you led that really well, right? So that was a really helpful way of starting and setting that precedent for here's what our focus is, here's where our agenda is going forward, and that is how can we be as fully present where we're at with everything going on, right? Because it does kind of affect it, doesn't it? You know, when, for example, my friends, when I was sharing with them about this really difficult interaction with this close person in my life that I was processing, it affected me for a good spell, for quite a few days, right? So it's hard not to experience, it's hard not to compartmentalize and saying, okay, now I've experienced this, is not going to seep over into this area of my life now, right? It's kind of like the things that we're going through in life in general, it seems to me, kind of affect all the other things. So I can be in that state of like, sadness, worry, or whatever it is that's spilling over, and that'll affect the way I parent, for example. If I'm not aware of how that is, I may have a shortness of patience, for example, if I'm not aware of how those experiences affect me, or it'll affect my work. People will say, "Oh, you're not as chipper as you usually are." So these things sort of like roll in, and if we're not aware of how our self-care piece is and what it looks like for us to tend to ourselves and give ourselves the space that we need, we might find ourselves kind of spiraling still downward in a depletion of energy or whatever. So yeah, I appreciated that.
Awareness then action. Absolutely. You can't act on something that's not in your conscious awareness, right? And some things are automatic and autopilot. Like if you're thirsty, it's hard to ignore. Most often, your body says you need something. Care for yourself. Care for your body. Go get a drink. Right. But with self-care, when it becomes psychological and various other aspects of our life, it becomes more complex. And sometimes our bodies don't say it quite as overtly as, say, thirst or hunger or fatigue, for example. Well, even fatigue, actually, sometimes it doesn't. Our body doesn't let us know so overtly. But
that's me.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't say that.
That's totally me. I'll own it.
Yeah. But yes. So when I work with my clients, one of the things that I try to teach them is, and especially at the end of therapy when they're disengaging from therapy, is do regular check-ins. How regular depends on how deep it is. But just check yourself out. Where's your mood? How's your energy level? How's your relationships going? Just it doesn't take. It takes like 5 minutes. Put it in your calendar. Just kind of do a scan of where your life's at, and then make a decision. If there's something, if everything's great, no problem. But if there's one or two or more things that are off, then make a decision as far as what you need to do it, and then do it. So check-ins.
Two things I want to say. The first one, don't answer it yet. Don't. It's a question, but don't answer it yet. Is self care only emotional or physiological or both? That's whatever. And then the other piece to that was, oh crap, it was, where was I going with that? How when we have these moments where our body is communicating to us, how do we know? How do we find the space to discern what we need? And I think people who recognize that they're introverts, this is where I was going with this, people who recognize and know themselves as introverts, I think may have a leg up with regards to self care because there's so much internalization. I don't know. So, two things. One, what really is self care for me to know? I'm asking for clarification. And is it is it? I'd love to hear from you. Is it a thing that perhaps maybe introverts and people who know themselves well as introverts are they better at self care stuff because of the internalization that goes on?
Can I take a kick out this first?
Yeah.
So first,
Frank.
oh, did you have something?
Yeah, something to say. Yeah.
I want to hear what Josh has to say, but I do have I guess I have venture an opinion.
Yes, I'd like to hear.
think,
Joshua has like the decisive word, but I want to get a piece.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if introverts are better at it, but I think they do it differently, and I think it comes down to like how do you recharge your batteries. That's to me what self care is. Bringing back to this concept where you were saying like, let's how do you bring your whole self into this situation or that situation, whether it's work or friendship or relationship. So yeah, like for me, it's definitely time alone is recharging my batteries and kind of getting to bed early and then being up, getting up with a lot of energy. That's like hand tackling the fatigue thing. But also other things like Joshua was talking about, these things that creep up on you, like sort of like stress and anxiety is something that I don't always check in on myself with. And that can be a challenge to make sure that I'm handling those things well. Um, so yeah, I think for those things, checking in is something that I have to consciously remind myself to do. And for me, there's a few things that I can think of that I would do to try to tackle that. But one of the main ones would be just spending a little bit of time meditating every day. That really, I find that's really helpful. But I do want to hear Joshua's answer to your question.
Well, first of all, I just want to say yes, meditation, absolutely. Time where you can slow down your breathing and just focus and enjoy the moment. Or whatever type of meditation you do. I mean, it can be a reflective, reminiscent type one. There's so many different types, but most of them, anyways, are good. Depends on you and your moments, what you need. But I'm fascinated by the theory or the hypothesis of introversion there, and I don't think that introverts would have a better. But I hear what you're saying in that introverts probably have perhaps more time in introspection. But on the flip side, extroverts might have more time in being able to bounce ideas and things off of other people, or have people say, "Hey, I see that you're off here," because they're in a social context more often. And so, which one is better? Which one is? I mean, I don't think that there's a better or worse. I think both can be helpful in theory, but self-care, physiological or emotional, I think that the two are the same. Emotions are physiological events in our bodies. And we interpret them through our psychologies, our brains, and we give them a label called an emotion. But really, they're energy and motion. Emotion. My professor used to say that. Just remember emotion, energy and motion. It's hormones, it's temperature, it's heart rate, it's movement, all of the things going on in our body. It's complex, and we feel it, and then we look at the context of why we think we feel it, and then we put a construct, a label on it. But really, it's all physiology.
And just so everyone's clear, the extrovert camp were those two
Yeah.
guys. Biniam and Joshua, and then we're the introvert camp over here.
Right over here.
That's why there's a clear division between winning side.
But I'll be honest, sometimes there's some jealousy. I wish I was a bit more on the introverted camp. Well, there's some downers to being extreme extroverts. And actually, maybe I'll say this because it relates to self-care. I sometimes feel I need to be around people because my mood and my energy level depend on being around people. And so I feel like there's a dependency. There's a lack of independence. And some things you need to do by yourself. You know, there's a lot of tasks in life that you need to be alone to do. And if I never want to be alone, those tasks don't get done or don't get they're not high on the priority list, and that can be a struggle. So yeah, it's not. So yeah, I have to be careful, and my self-care is, of course, I enjoy being around people. For me, that's my self-care. It's doing this. Like, this is just like, yes, I get to do this, right? But if at the same time, if I neglect all of these tasks that need kind of just myself to do, then they build up, and then the stressors, etc., or I forget things, balls get dropped, etc., and then that affects my self-care in that regard. So it's sort of like a moment-to-moment self-care versus a long-term thing, right?
There's two things I was thinking also in reference to what you're posing there, Roger, and that is, on the one hand, self-care, there's the element, the word I was thinking of is, self-care is the awareness piece. So the awareness is a really helpful factor. And I know for some, they may be thinking, I don't know myself well enough to know what I need. You know what I'm saying? For self-care, I don't know how to tend to myself. I don't know what I enjoy that's going to help put energy back in when it's been depleted. So there's that element there. So the awareness piece is really helpful, and I'm not sure if there's some suggestions among you guys of how those who are in that camp of sort of like they're looking, but they don't know what it is. They don't know what expression it should take. Should they go for a walk? Should they go for parachuting? That's extreme self-care.
Like skydiving?
Yeah, some adrenaline.
The thrill-seeking.
Right, the thrill-seeking options. Or, so there's the awareness piece on the one hand. But then alongside of the awareness piece comes also the confidence piece of owning what it looks like. Because there may be some celebrated forms of self-care that are more, presentable, or it's cooler to embody. For example, it might be better to go do yoga for some people, right? Or to go cycling. Or so people might say, I'm supposed to do this one here because this is what is on everyone else's radar. And so I feel like I have to do this just to fit in outside of even considering if that serves you or not, right? So the confidence piece of like not only being aware of what it looks like for you to have self-care, but also how you can own whatever that expression is, even if it's just sitting and looking at the rocks or the grass growing. And that might be something that sounds bizarre, but if that serves you, being able to own whatever expression of self-care that looks like that serves your needs. Do you know what I'm saying?
I would say one of the more unexpected versions of self-care that I did one time was I just decided to pack up and go camping by myself. I was gone for 2 nights, and it ended up being like sort of almost like a mindfulness retreat in a way. It was unintentional. I didn't go out and decide that I was gonna, sit on the grass and meditate for 2 days. But essentially, I didn't talk to anyone for 2 days.
Right.
And I just hung out by the water, hung out by the fire, went on walks all the time, listened to a lot of music.
Yeah.
And it's weird. Like when I was driving home, I felt like a totally different person. I felt like $1,000,000.
Huh.
And yeah, I haven't really done that. I've done it I've done maybe 1 day since, and I had other people join me. But it was kind of remarkable. So I do kind of wonder if I did a more intentional kind of like mindfulness retreat, if that would be something that would work for me. But yeah, I mean that was sort of like the largest intentional expression of self care that I've ever done. And at the time, I was going through a rough patch, and that kind of came back feeling like far more refocused and energized. Kind of maybe that giving that space to kind of sort through my feelings and sort through my thoughts and sort through how I wanted to move forward.
I wonder if we all need different things and different degrees of things depending on where we are in life. And this all spinning out of my own fluidity perspective. But I'll tell you this, something that I do daily. And you talk about meditation. And I only realized it was a recalibrating or a self-care thing until I'm only realizing it now from talking. I take a lot of showers. And it's not because I feel dirty, but I started to realize, and it started happening in the pandemic. I started to realize a release that would happen once I would go through the showers, and my creativity would have been ignited with ideas, so much so that I had to jump right out of the shower, dripping wet, to write things down or send myself an email. Yeah. I find, and I don't know if this is pandemic specific, I find that even if I took a shower the night before, I can't get up and go, brush my teeth and go. I need to encapsulate myself in the shower with the steam and get my mind and do some sort of a self-care activity to put my day in perspective. And I'm realizing that I do this from everything we're talking about, and I kind of started realizing that I needed it in my day, because I would find that if I got up, brush my teeth and jump into work, and this is pandemic specific type of description, and then at 11 o'clock I hadn't done that morning purge, my equilibrium was off. Yeah, so I think I'm recognizing for myself that my tiny daily self-care activity is half an hour in a shower every morning, and that's one thing. But I need more. I need more too, because that what you described resonates for me too. The mindful thing.
Can I want to kind of step from that, and I don't want to specifically talk about having a shower, but I think that there's something about self-care and routine and habits, because I don't know whatever the task is that we can just put our minds on the shelf, metaphorically speaking, for a bit, and just go on autopilot. You know, there's something about that allows us to just relax and breathe, and you know, it. For example, as a therapist, with therapy, there's often a lot of talk of set goals, action steps, do something different, and that's good, for sure good. But I think that we have to be really mindful of not putting too much on our plate, because then that can be counter-effective, and it can add too much stress, because every new thing that we do, everything that we do differently is a stressor. We have to change our way of being or change our way of thinking, which can be good, but it's work. And so instead, in addition to that, so do that, yes, for sure, but also have a handful of things where it's just routine, and we can just feel good because you know what to expect. Your mind doesn't have to race about uncertainties. You know, what's it going to be like when I get in the shower today? I don't have to think about that. I know exactly what it's going to be like. It's going to be good. It's going to feel relaxing, etc., right? So habit and routine.
Humans are routine-based creatures.
Yeah.
And working in that post-pandemic, pandemic world, you're used to getting up every day, showering, getting dressed, going to work, but then all of a sudden you're working in your pajamas every day.
Right.
So then you're like, well, yeah, I need that routine, that start to my day. I get that. I'm very much the same way. I like to have that.
I don't.
Consistency.
I like having my own, I like being able to play outside of boundaries by way of saying, hey, I feel like doing this just because I can, and I'm not locked into a schedule. But I found lately that that's not going to work long term for me, especially if I'm setting goals to try and achieve something. That I have to have a regimen. For example, like my podcasts. If I have them all over the place whenever I feel like it, I'm not going to be able to set something that others can depend upon. our get-togethers, on Saturday evenings now. If you just had them whenever you wished, we wouldn't be able to plan for them in consistent ways, right? It's like, okay, does Joshua feel like it? Oh, I can't now because my schedule, right? So there's that element that I'm having to acknowledge that I don't necessarily, that I'm not really a fan of, but nonetheless, I'm acknowledging.
I think there must be a percentage of people that are less routine oriented
Yeah,
out there.
yeah.
And they kind of
Still make it work.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I would say maybe they can get away with it, especially if either they've taught their community to depend on their spontaneity, and that the community just wants to play along those lines, or maybe they don't have a lot of people who are depending on them for whatever. It seems like that might be something that might work in those contexts.
Yes, yes. Having kids definitely
Yep.
kind of puts you into that. Well,
Yeah. We can all relate. Here's some specific ways that I'm implementing self-care in my life. And I'm going to present it by way of a contrast, before and after. So before, when I didn't have those elements, and then the afterwards. You want to just check the voice? You go ahead. We've got young kids in the mix here, and so they're just forgetting to keep their voices quieter for our podcast. But that's okay, because this is what life looks like. So for me, before and after, it goes along the following lines. Before, I used to live life in a very codependent context. And so, in doing so, I really didn't have any frame of reference of looking after me first and foremost. I was more along the lines of serving everyone else's needs, and that's kind of how I've been brought up, to be selfless, right? To be selfless is to give myself, to become a doormat. And I love serving other people, but I didn't have that balance that said, hey, what do I need to look after myself? The first time I saw this coming up was in my latter teens, when I was serving at the church that I was serving at, and I was doing like 20 billion things at the church, but I loved giving myself. But at some point, I came to realize, as much as I love giving myself away and serving the kids in the nursery and teaching and youth group and music team and all these elements, at some point I realized, oh, I'm actually feeling kind of hungry for something to be also beefed up in here, right? Like I was noticing that disparity. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm being served here. And so that was when I first took note of that. It took me another couple of decades to still come to the realization that, oh, I'm still in that zone, right? So it's only in the last 5-7 years that I've been able to do that recalibration and saying, oh, right, there's me at the center who needs to be looking after me first before I consider my community, my world around me that I'm engaging with. What does that look like for me to attend to myself? That was a big sort of like eye opener for me, and putting self-care on the map. Now, I'm still struggling my way forward, but at least now I have eyes to see and say, okay, I can at least be aware. There's awareness piece of saying, here's where I once was. I acknowledge that that's not where I want to be anymore. Where am I moving forward into? In the afterwards piece now, that self-care looks like a few different ways. One of those areas that I'm still struggling with, actually not as much anymore, is the sleep category. So I put sleep front and center as my number one priority, although there are times like currently when I'm just saying, okay, I'm going to sneak and fudge a little bit here for the next couple of days just because of my schedule that I'm trying to keep, but I want to keep that more consistent there, right? I feel I'm doing really good in self-care in context of my social engagements. That was my big Achilles heel once upon a time. My social life was, oh man, I loved being able to exceed expectations. And man, I could read a person before and know or perceive what their expectations of me were and just nail it. And the kudos I got, I enjoyed that. But now I'm sacrificing that acceptance or pursuit of acceptance to say, no, where do I calibrate? Like, what do I need first and foremost? How do I communicate what I can and can't do with people? And how do I learn to disappoint others and be okay with that? How do I learn to be able to say no when I need to say no, And so those expressions. Now, the piece that I still want to make sure I don't let go of is how to do so, like in our previous context of implementing boundaries with kindness. That was our previous podcast. Remember that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rich conversation there. And yet, how do I continue keeping that theme while being true to what I need for myself? So in my social engagements now, I feel I'm doing really well in the piece of saying, here's how far I can extend myself in the whatever context we're engaging in, whether it's deep friendships, more casual friendships, relationships, like whatever that gamma looks like, even at my role as a dad, knowing how to be able to communicate that. And so I feel really a sense of growing competence in that. So I'm really thankful for that. Whereas before I was just like, oh, I don't know how to say no. I feel like I have to do this, and find myself wearing down, but not realizing that that was a really not a good spot for me. I kept on just depleting myself. And I mean, it was remarkable seeing how much energy I just continued to put forth and putting out there. But now I've at the point where I'm saying I can, but it doesn't necessarily mean I need to.
Did you come to realize that maybe you were not a bottomless pit of energy to give to
Absolutely.
others?
I acknowledge that. And I acknowledge that. Here's the thing, Frank. I'm going to acknowledge that. Now, there's a way that I'm learning even how to acknowledge my strengths without seeming ostentatious or presumptuous or boastful. So I'm going to say I acknowledge that I have a lot more energy than the average person does. And I love being able to expand. But I also want to learn the discipline of acknowledging my humanity and saying I'm not bottomless, like you're saying. I don't have I'm noticing my limitations much more in my growing years. Now, at my current age, I just can't do what I once used to be able to do.
Was there a turning point that sort of catalyzed you making that change?
Yes. And it came when I pushed myself to the very brink. So put myself pushing to the very brink. With the amount of energy I had at the time, I loved exploiting it and accomplishing things that people were like, how do you get this done? I throve off those kind of compliments. But when I started, when I was tired, Frank, when I was tired, I could still keep going. But if I was tired, but I sat down to read a book or do some homework, that's when I was done. My body just shut down. But I knew I'd reached the brink, and I saw this consistently over the pattern of a few months. When I was tired and I was doing something active, I learned I can still keep going. But then when I started sleepwalking, when I was doing whatever activity I was doing, then I knew, wow, I've really pushed myself to a point where I don't have that reference point. I haven't learned how to see the gauge. In your car, you can see the gas thing, kind of thing. I don't see that gauge internally by way of my energy. So now, seeing that at that point and saying, I don't know how to balance or bring balance here. That was my point where I'm like, I need to start acknowledging my humanity, my limitations, and how I can acknowledge that. I can't do the 3 day marathon stints of just work without any sleep. I can't do that anymore. I need sleep every day now. Right? My body is going to shut down. So knowing that for my own safety and the safety of others, and also learning how to put that in by way of principle, I'm trying to acknowledge my limitations, and that's something that I want to implement.
Good for you.
Thank you.
It's a big transformation.
I'm acknowledging it, and I'm thankful for it. Yeah. So those are some practical things that I'm saying. Here's what self-care for me looks like. And then a new threshold that was just opened up this weekend, when we were having our, we call it bin labrators, our bin labrators.
Everything starts with
I,
Ben.
I picked the name, actually. I picked the name, yeah.
So as we were there, and as I was just sitting in that zone of, like you guys are saying, no, when you just look internally. We did this also last week with Rob and Linda's seminar of physiologically addressing what's going on internally, and in the sense of saying, how does this feel in these zones here, kind of thing. And so that was really helpful as well too. Yeah. So these are some elements that I'm like, yeah, this is really important. So, yeah.
I just want to throw a thought out here
Yeah.
with regards to what we're talking about, and it's a word of encouragement for balance. So self-care, what you need and what you needed and where you were, your need for balance is to move to this in this direction, right? To care for yourself more in several ways.
Yes.
And I think that there's a sort of a sweet spot, and everyone may be slightly different, I suppose, physiologically, their values, etc. But there is such a thing, I think, maybe to care for yourself too much.
Tell me about that, John.
Well, think about it. If people were like, I deserve 8 vacations a year, and I deserve to sleep until noon all the time, and people should wait on me, and on and on and on. For example, you hear of these. I don't know if you guys have heard of the people that would call EMS. They stub their toe, and it's like, get me an ambulance. The people that crave attention and that believe perhaps and act in some ways, um, act like they deserve all the self care, and from other people as well. And so that's a tough one. So yeah, where's the balance? Where's the middle spot? Right? Where's the sweet spot?
Yeah, yeah.
Fine.
There are people out there like that.
That's true. That's true. And there are people, I mean, I really resonate with your bottomless pit piece. There are people who take advantage of persons who are not able to keep a certain balance. I have had to be very forceful around self-care stuff with work employees because I was giving and doing and working and doing and working and doing and working and doing and working and doing, and it was impacting my sleep and it was impacting my stress levels. And so the more I did is the more they expected. The more I did, the more they expected. And about 8 months ago or 6 months ago, I decided to create some boundaries for my self-care. Bring back the boundaries. And so I would say, okay, no, this rush job that needs to be done is important, but I am not the causal factor behind why this is now a high rush. I will do the best that I can. I'm not going to go 24 hours, and we'll get this done. You know, and so that for me as well is self-care again. Communicate, being able to have the courage.
Yes.
Being able to have the courage to communicate that to people.
It takes guts. Tell me a little bit more about that. Talk a little bit more on that.
I don't know how I got there. Because I used to be a heavy people pleaser type. Not so much anymore. Gone through a bit of number of epiphanies in life.
Sure.
I honestly don't know where I got the courage.
Was it just like you had enough at some point? You're like, okay, enough of this. Is this not serving me anymore? Or
yeah, I mean, my entire career has been years of work life have been in law firm context, right? That's law firm and academia, right? Primarily law firm, and those machines are like white collar sweatshops in these law firm environments, right? I mean, it's knowledge work, but it's knowledge sweatshops.
And they have no boundaries.
And they tend not to have boundaries, and so they tend to have things happen that are outside the realms of reason in terms of deadlines. And the expectation is so you get pushed to produce within difficult parameters. And so I'd love to figure out when did I find the courage, only we recently, about in the past year or so, to speak up and say, I cannot do that. I remember distinctly a moment that happened 2 weeks ago with my coworker who is overly anxious personality, and she has no self-care at all. It's clear to me. And I wonder if there's a connection between anxiety and self-care and all that. But the point about an anecdote I want to bring in is we're on the phone, her and I are meeting and we're talking, and an email comes to the both of us from a lawyer, and her stress level just went up. Oh, we got to take care of that. I'm like, no, we're not. You and I are having a conversation. We're working. She has to wait, right? And so for me, that was self-care. For me, that was setting boundaries. For me, that was looking out for my wellness, because I'm not a spaghetti noodle to be pulled in all these different directions. And so I spoke up. So you asked a good question. I don't know where I found the courage to start doing that.
That's a significant point, and I'm going to bring another point with reference to the courage piece, because this weekend I had another opportunity to exercise self-care, and I was having with a couple of people, and my time was with them, but I got a call from someone who needed something right now, and he was across town. So I had to tell that person, hey, listen, I'm unavailable for a couple of hours. My previous self would have said, oh, crap, I got to go, guys, because I feel like I'm between two taskmasters, if you will, right? And I had to run over there and like try and attend to it, right? I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I'm unavailable for a couple of hours. If you can hold out, great. If not, you have to find some other means again. So the question piece is, and it relates to courage, is when do you, like, have you guys ever had that experience of exercising or practicing self-care even though you knew it would disappoint others? Do you see what I'm saying? Because that's where the courage piece comes in, to be able to say, it's a brave thing to say no to someone, right? It's a brave
At the
thing
same
to say.
time, it's kind of empowering
Okay.
to kind of, if you kind of let everyone else rule your life,
Right.
because you view yourself as unimportant,
Uh,
or your own needs as unimportant,
sure.
then when you start saying no, you start to feel a whole lot better. And I think that there's a way to do that constructively, where like, oh hey, like I can't do that right now, but here's a space where I can do that, rather than just being completely like it's only about me.
Or I can't offer this, but I can offer that.
Yes, exactly. So like, like I can. Okay, hey, buddy across town, I can't meet you right now,
Sure.
but when I'm finished up here, I can meet you at 6 o'clock.
Right.
That's when I'm free.
Yeah.
If that doesn't work for you, I'm sorry. Like that's the reality of my availability.
Yeah.
I like that, Frank.
So
it's really good.
yeah. So I guess that's the way I would answer that question.
It's good.
That intersects with something you told me privately about boundaries and non-negotiables. It's the same thing.
Explain.
I don't want to go too deep in it because it's a story that is resident with you.
Okay.
But
Feel free. My story is free. I'm giving you permission.
No, it's about a person that you have a relationship with who disappointed you. Right? Remember that? Yeah, who disappointed you. And so what Frank's doing in that context is the same thing that you did.
I see.
In terms of communicating that these are your non-negotiables, and if you can't meet them, then no. So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same. You see what I'm saying? Maybe you want to re-articulate it. So
absolutely. So no, I appreciate that prompt there, and I think it is the same. So when I think of how I connect with people, I like doing that intentionally, right? For my riders, to strangers I meet along the way, or for me, it's not ambiguous. It's more like, hey, I have this opportunity. Here's where I'd like to get to, given the context here. I'm seeing them for 5 minutes. This is going to be an amazing 5 minutes if you're willing to play it.
But I mean, I guess also along those lines is not just that you're not available, but maybe you plan something that's a self-care activity, whether that's spending time with friends, whether that's getting an extra hour of sleep, whether that's
implementation of that would be like
for yourself and making that a priority.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And being like, you know what? Right now is me time.
Right.
And I need that me time so that I have more energy.
But again, and I don't negate that, since I agree. I think again, going to this topic of balance, like if you made a commitment and you're ill and you have COVID, okay, cancel. Self-care, and other care for that matter, because. But if it's just like meh, I just not feeling up to it, but you've made a solid commitment in someone else's schedule and something very important.
Yeah.
Then it's like, well, is that really self-care? Well, it is self-care, but it's also not really respecting others to some degree too.
That.
So that's where the balance comes in.
I think that we have a lot of people in this group that tend to overextend themselves for others, but I think there are a large contingent of people that can be more on the other end of that spectrum.
That's right.
And maybe over prioritize themselves.
Yeah.
And end up disappointing their friends and disappointing the people that care about them because they have consistently have this pattern of picking themselves over others. And so then they need to think about. I don't know how this fits into the self-care.
I think it does, because I remember when I overextended myself, and I still do that from time to time, even amongst our group here too. When I find myself overextending myself, and I still fall into those patterns, I can't hold all the balls I promised to hold. That's probably a terrible analogy. I can't fulfill all the obligations I had intended to fulfill, and so things fall between the cracks, and others are affected as results. So I can understand what you're saying, Joshua, especially, for example, if I said, I'm going to be there on Friday, for sure, and then something unexpected comes along, and I'm depleted energy-wise, and then I call and say, hey, listen, I promised to be there, I just don't have what it takes to be there, so this may put you back, but I just can't fulfill. If that becomes a pattern, that's concerning.
That's right.
But if it's like one of those things where you're trying to navigate your own temperament and abilities to fulfill and commit in certain areas, and then also still take time off for yourself, that's probably something else.
That happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But if you're consistently, I get it. And sometimes they interact with people like that, and it's frustrating because you feel disappointed because
Yeah.
they don't necessarily prioritize you.
Yeah.
At all, really, or only when it suits them.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. That's really good. I had one other thing that I wanted to explore, and that is the selfishness versus the selflessness piece um, in relation to self care. So some would see self care as that's just being selfish, and that's terrible, right? So they may opt for the selfless expressions that say, I can't be a selfish person, so I have to keep on being in this zone of giving because that's what's right. And one of the things I think I've personally come to experience for me in my self care, selfishness isn't a bad word. So
I love that you just said that.
Take on that. Yeah.
Well, I use that. I've thought about that a lot actually. This word selfish in the sense that, you know, we come out of our mothers being selfish. We have to be selfish as children, especially as infants. It's like wah, I need. It's all about me. Self-care, care for me. Someone else care for me. And that's not a bad thing. We need that, and gradually we become less selfish, hopefully. But we still have needs, and we still have to meet them. And hopefully, most of them we can meet through ourselves. But sometimes we need other people to help to satisfy those needs. So, yes, there are times in our lives, there's phases in our lives, there's aspects of our life that we're selfish in that regard. But of course, the word selfish has a negative connotation. And if it's referring to like the entire person only focus, you know, the extreme again perspective, extreme spectrum of self care where people are only focusing on themselves and don't care about anybody else. That's not helpful. And the idea here is that if you care for yourself well, that you're going to be a better person. You're going to have better energy, better mood, better introspection, better ability to connect with others, help others, etc. If you care for yourself.
I like that. It's almost like
so by being selfish, you're being selfless. Indirectly.
You're enabling yourself to be selfless.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you do it properly.
Yeah, appropriately.
and in a place of balance, of course, right?
In the last few minutes here of the podcast, I'm going to throw out some questions. These guys do not know what questions I'm coming up with. I'm coming up with them on the spot, but just I'm going to think of some questions here, potential questions that our viewers may be coming from various backgrounds. So Frank, let me throw you the first question here.
Sure.
How would you answer one of our viewers or one of our listeners who is saying something like, I don't feel like I deserve to care for myself because they have such a low valuation of self? What would you say to that individual?
It's a tough one.
It is a big one there, isn't it?
It's a tough one. It's a big one.
I'm thinking especially like in the minds of some like who are on the receiving end of what we're talking about here, and they're saying, must be nice, but it's inaccessible to me because they haven't learned how to see themselves as even worthy of that love and self-care.
I wish I had an articulate answer to that. It's tough, you know, but I think that that it's you can gain so much energy and self-esteem and I don't know, gain positivity by starting to even take a little bit of that kind of like self-care kind of approach to life, and that you'll find that it starts to change the way you see the world and the way that you interact with people, and you can start to build your confidence. But yeah, it's I think it's kind of like someone that's feeling that low, that empty. You know, if it's like just even getting out of bed is a challenge. That's hard, and you know, I'm not a professional by any means, but even just getting like one little thing accomplished that day, you know, I think that you can build on that. It can go a long way to trying to improve your life and the way that you view yourself.
And perhaps even for those who need that little bit of a boost, find the right people to speak into their lives that way as a catalyst.
Yeah,
absolutely.
If you can get people that are for kind of, you know, every day
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
remind you
Yeah.
that you're
Yeah.
worth it.
Yeah.
Um, that kind of external
Mhm.
stimulus can be really, really
Sure.
helpful
Or
to try
remove
and
the
break out
people
of that
that are
funk.
remove the
Yeah.
people from your life that are doing the opposite too.
Yes, there are. Yes,
Yeah.
recognizing toxicity,
Amazing.
trying to
Yeah.
minimize or remove those kind of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's challenging, it's scary, but be very important for making your life happier.
There's a lot of beautiful things in the world that many people don't have the opportunity to see because they never have opportunity to even be taken to those places, right? Whether like in reality or even relationally. And so, yeah, I think that was a really appropriate answer for those who are like, hey, it must be nice, but I wish I had access. And so, yeah. Roger, what would you say to the individual who says self care is unnecessary?
Mm. Well, that's another tough one too, because I mean, the only analogy to it I could give is, I mean, it's if you think of the airplane
Yeah.
and the oxygen mask and how they always advise and say that you got to take care of your mask first before you put the mask on.
Yeah.
It's as necessary as that, as that analogy. You can't help another person. You can't do for another person. You can't be for another if you're not breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be the best thing I would come up with as a way to counter answer that person in terms of what self care is. It's so much of an essential that when absent or minimal in our lives, that we're caricatures of our really true self, and not fully walking in our power, as I hear that said a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense.
It made so much sense.
Oh my god.
Brother, you've got intuition.
I don't know where it's coming from.
Here's the thing: we're modeling talking to friends,
Mm-hmm.
and we're trying to also help those who are probably saying, "I don't have those kind of friends to talk to." So
Mm-hmm.
that's where some of these potential questions are coming from. Josh, your brother, what would you say to the individual who says, "Okay, I'm convinced I need self care, but I don't know what self care looks like for me, or even how to start accessing what self care looks like for me in the way I need it." What would you say to that individual as a starting point?
See a psychologist.
He's a psychologist, so his number is.
I would say that you probably already do know what some self care things are. I think everybody knows it.
Mm.
You just need to ask yourself a few questions like, what are the things that you do, have historically done, or could do in the future that make you a little bit excited, or that make you think, yeah, that would be nice and relaxing? What are the things that you historically, even if you're not doing it currently, if you work hard, say work a full day's work, what do you like to do at the end of a hard day of work? If you were to hang out with people, what type of activity might you want to do with your friends? So I think that every human being, if you breathed air, you've engaged in self care in so many different capacities, and there could be people out there that are feeling like, okay, what used to feel good isn't feeling good anymore. Now that's one of the symptoms of clinical depression. So that can be really, really tough. And if that's fairly extreme, well, first of all, I would say that in many cases, if that's the case, it's often in the brain, and if we just go and do it, we'll actually find that we enjoy it better than we predict that we're going to enjoy it, the activity. If that makes sense. But even if they do it and still don't enjoy it, and try new things and still don't enjoy it or don't feel relaxed, etc., that's when finding a professional. That's kind of the benchmark that I would say. Yeah, it's important to look to see your doctor, psychiatrist, or counselor.
Really helpful piece there. I like that. What Josh was saying is, if you don't have those kind of people, safe people in your life, by way of friendships, by way of family, perhaps even, There's nothing wrong with looking for professional help, and actually, that's really highly commendable. They have tools, they have the ways of helping you make some breakthroughs, and so that's really helpful. Let me ask myself a hard question too. Is that okay, guys? Because I kind of put you on the hot spot. So, the question for me to answer is: self-care important? Yes.
You took the easy one.
Shucks to ruin. Friends, thank you for following along in this episode. This has been episode 11 on the Friendology podcast, talking about the themes of what self-care looks like for each one of us, our experiences with it, our ideas of what it could be, and even how we can benefit from it. And so, you're worthwhile being loved, and you're worthwhile investing in it. So invest in yourself by way of attending to what self-care looks like. We're fumbling our way through it, and we commend it for your sake. We'll be back again in a couple weeks' time. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but we're committed to what friendship could look like in an intentional way as we grow stronger in our connections. We hope to see you then. Bye for now.